Welcome to GPS Your Health, where we help you navigate our ever-changing healthcare system. I'm Robin Denton, your host. If you've ever felt lost in the medical system, overwhelmed by options, or unheard by the very people meant to help you, you are not alone. Here, we believe that God cares deeply about your health and your purpose. The enemy may be trying to keep you stuck in sickness, but there is hope. When you invite God into your healing journey, He will give you wisdom, direction, and He'll bring the right people that you need at just the right time, because He is the great physician. As you listen, I ask that you keep an open mind. Healing doesn't always look the way we expect. It didn't for me. And many are finding true, lasting wellness through holistic approaches that care for the body, mind, and spirit. Remember, what the sun sets free is free indeed. Oh, and one more thing, be sure to grab your free copy of 7 Qualities to Look For in a Doctor to help you get started in the right direction. The link is below, and let's get started. Hi there, everyone. I'm Robin Denton with GPS Your Health and founder of the Healed Podcast. And today I have Dr. Jana Bunsic here with me. She is an osteopathic doctor here in Morristown, Tennessee. So, Dr. Bunsic, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I have been a physician for about 25 years now. I started out in South Florida and I've been here in East Tennessee for the last 18 years. It'll be 18 years in July. And I have always been an outside the box doctor. I've always considered myself to be a true osteopathically rooted physician, which means, of course, I'm going to look at things more holistically. I'm looking more at like the structure and the function of the body, restoring the body's ability to heal. And as the last 20 plus years have gone on, that's really evolved a lot in some different ways into functional medicine and the osteopathic branch of functional medicine. I also really like to look at like deep root cause, so deep metabolic health. I have a subspecialty as a physician nutritionist as well. And I have a great passion too for spirit, soul, body healing, and have been doing a lot of meditative work, and our paths have crossed in spiritual circles as well, Robin. And I really have a passion for that. And I'm getting ready to release a book soon about spirit, soul, body healing, utilizing the Hebrew living letters as meditative. So I kind of have two big sides. I do the kind of the functional osteopathic side, hands-on stuff with the metabolic side. And then kind of through all that, I incorporate the spirit, soul, body as well.
Well, I love that, and I cannot wait for the book. We'll have to talk about the book. So today we're going to be addressing a hot topic or a big topic, the GLP-1 drugs. That's what we want to talk about today. And those are going to be drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy, Mounjaro, Trulicity. So you can go in, get a shot and lose weight. So, Dr. Bunsic, will you just clarify for us first, like kind of what are those drugs? Like, what do they do?
Yeah. So GLP-1s are a peptide. So there's a lot of talk in the space right now about peptides. So all peptides are like small pieces of protein, but they have certain types of biochemical triggers on them, and trigger different things, reactions in the body. And so what we're kind of finding, and it's really interesting, is like as we're becoming more and more inflamed and we have more and more nutritional issues, we tend to develop these deficiencies in these key peptides. So what you're seeing a lot in this space is you have people biohacking and doing like a bazillion different peptides sometimes. Sometimes GLP-1s are just the tip of the iceberg, which is, it's both fascinating and a little crazy too, because when you look at it, it's like, yeah, there's a bazillion peptides in your body. And if your body's not functioning properly, you may need 20 different peptides. And I have seen patients coming into my office on 12, 14 peptides because of the breakdown in the body. So they do have a role. And what Big Pharma did is they found this GLP-1, which is a very specific peptide. And what that does is it works very strongly in your gut, but also your brain, right? So we all know there's one of the hot topics now is food noise, right? Somebody is a family member of mine was talking about, I just know, I'm just thinking about it because I got to get rid of the food noise, right? It's like, what is food noise? Like, it's like, is
Well,
it when you're cooking,
tell me. I don't know. What is food noise?
apparently that's a trending thing, right? Is food
I've not
noise.
heard this thing.
Yeah, yeah. So it's apparently because you're just thinking about food all the time, right? So it's like I guess it's a background noise in your head, right? Like it's that background, limbic system overactivity, but instead of, being the rat on acid brain telling you fight or flight, it's telling you, oh, eat to be safe, right? And so a lot of people, from emotional issues that triggers with food, right? And most people will admit that they're not doing it because they're hungry, right? They're just, or maybe they think they're hungry, but they know they're really not hungry, But it's becomes a confusing place in the brain. And the brilliant thing is, yes, the GLP-1s do make that more clear in the brain. So that is a fascinating scientific fact, and it's completely true, right? The problem has become where you take one thing, right? Like I said, we've got so many different multitudes of peptides, enzymes, cofactors, vitamins, nutrients that are interplaying in your body all the time. And you take one and you just hype your body up on that thing, right? It can have a positive effect. It's kind of like when people are like, oh, well, everybody should take testosterone because it's great. Like everybody should do this because it's like, yeah, you may feel good, and it may have a beneficial effect for a time, but because you are using it out of balance, right? And out of proportional to the effect it should be having in a synchronicity with all the other things that should be happening of positive effects in your body, then we develop negative side effects, right? And nobody cares as long as you're doing great on it, but then there becomes a problem because what it does do is it slows down your digestion, right? That is something that it does until it slows down your digestion so much that you develop gastroparesis or you develop ileus, which is a complete shutdown of one part of your intestine, right? And then you have to have an emergency bowel surgery that could be life threatening, right? Those things, it's supposed to affect your pancreas and it's supposed to help, to balance your insulin with your pancreas unless it goes into the pancreas and causes inflammation and pancreatitis, which I've also seen. So same thing with the gallbladder, right? The gallbladder, all these different organs are supposed to work synchronously to help with your digestion. So when you're getting unhealthy levels of this drug because you're not using it the way the body designed to use it, you're using it over that, then you start developing these side effects. And unfortunately, because of the way the GI system works, most people don't have great nervous system connection to their digestive system. So you could have, very low levels of this problem developing and they're like, oh, well, I tolerated it great until this happened. Well, you really didn't. It's just that you don't know how to respond to those signals in your body, and your GI system normally doesn't really let you know until something's really bad because it's functioning all the time. So you're just kind of dealing with that and you're going on. Plus, Americans in general are kind of used to bad GI health, right? Like people have become and it's been a challenge for me in my practice because gut health is like a very big part of my practice. It's very foundational. I'm like, gut health to save the world, and I mean, the more I go on, the more I believe that to be true. So it's like the hard thing is like, it's like a lot of people are just really disconnected from their gut, right? Like they're not feeling what's going on there. And so they have a very late response. So it's like, but like, why do we need screening for colon polyps, right? Why do we have to get colonoscopies? Can't we tell that there's problems in our colon? Well, it's taken many decades, but finally we've convinced patients as doctors, you can't tell what's going on in your colon, I mean, and maybe that's something we could spiritually evolve into. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is we don't get good sensation until things are going awry, right? So, and unfortunately, big pharma and even now little pharma, where you're doing the compounded and a lot of the weight loss clinics and stuff, they're financially motivated to continue you on the drugs, right? And I watched a CME episode, a continuing medical education from a doctor from Harvard who's one of the big wigs in their obesity program. I think she runs like the whole center. And she very well spoken. And she basically said, we're looking at these drugs just for obesity, not for diabetes. So I do utilize this medication sometimes for uncontrolled diabetic patients. I think there's a place for it there, but the use for it in obesity, because the whole thing of obesity being a chronic condition, so just like diabetes, it needs chronic medication. And that Harvard is the number one place for big pharma contributions. They're getting billions of dollars of big pharma to develop these protocols and then to make this the standard of care in medicine.
Mhm. Mhm. So you mentioned some of the side effects. I want to talk
Mhm.
a little more about the side effects. As I was doing a little research for this podcast, I found there's been several lawsuits against some of these companies. One lady,
Finally,
yes,
finally.
one lady in Kentucky has even her gut did become paralyzed, and
Mhm.
she started having blood clots and all kinds of
Yeah.
issues. And I don't know how that was resolved. I will certainly be looking into that. But let's talk more about the side effects of these drugs, because I feel like that's something that gets overlooked. It's like, even if you're not obese, I feel like people are put on these drugs just to lose weight. Either your sugar is high, or I feel like they are selling
Yeah.
these drugs to people who don't need them. So let's talk about what
Definitely.
the side effects are.
Yeah, and just to touch on that last point you made real quick, there's a new trend called microdosing, right? It's like so that it's kind of like spreading this cultural trend that really everybody should be on little doses of this, and that if you're just doing microdosing, it's okay. It's just kind of like I'm like, yeah, just small amounts of cyanide are okay too. Like no, like if why would you microdose that? What you need to do is fix the root cause of the problem, which we'll get into a little bit more
Yes.
later. But the yeah, I mean, so this is the interesting thing. I can't remember the year that these came out, but it's been a number of years now. And anybody who's a drug rep who's ever been to my office knows that they kind of like got to watch out for me because I'm gonna like corner them and ask them like a million questions, and I'll be like the one going through all the studies. Like that's always been me, right? So they come to my office and I'm like, okay, well, I want to know what the risks are. I want to know what the studies have shown. I want to know all the negative side effects. And so this is the thing. They knew from the beginning, definitely about thyroid carcinoma. That was something that they had to disclose to get the FDA approval. And they got the FDA approval with the warning at the very top, of that this had caused thyroid carcinoma in rats. Now, of course, the fact that they'd not been taking high enough doses for long enough in any human trials to really, because thyroid carcinoma is a slow growing carcinoma in humans. Now, rats don't live as long as humans, so you can't extrapolate that data exactly, but you know that there's an increased risk there. So it's doing something in the thyroid that is also something that can proliferate cancer cells. That alone, was a concern for me and anybody who came to my office from day one that wanted to consider this. That was the discussion I had with them. Do you have a family history of thyroid carcinoma? There's also another carcinoma syndrome known as MEN syndrome, MEN, which is multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome. So people who tend to get like multiple different types of growths in their endocrine organs. And that has been well known from the very beginning, too. That was another one of the warnings from the very beginning. And then we just knew the process was going to slow down the intestinal system. And they knew that it also had negatively affected pancreatic enzymes. So these are things that I had discussed with patients from the beginning, right? Which is why I'm not making a lot of money on selling GLP-1s, right? Because,
Mhm.
when you really sit down and discuss the pros and cons with people, a lot of people will say, well, maybe on second thought, I do need to work on my diet, right? Which is how the conversation should go. But the
Mhm.
problem is, and one of the reasons why I stepped out of the traditional healthcare system and into a fee for service based practice that is time malleable is that it just takes a lot more time to have those conversations with people, and of course more equipping. Like you have to understand dietary science and nutritional science more, which has been big in the headlines that we all know doctors don't get. And unfortunately, I hate to tell you, we're still not getting, and there's, a lot of issues behind, what's going to happen there. But, it's been known from the beginning, all these things, but somehow I've noticed this thing that's happened, and I think it's gotten a lot worse since COVID. Which is odd because everybody's become kind of awakened to what happened with the COVID vaccine, which I've been talking to people about forever. But, this whole thing of like when they go and get a drug, like there's not a conversation about side effects. Now, when I was going through training, just in basic medical school, we're not talking about no fancy functional medicine, nothing. It was just a requirement for me in my visit to pass my residency program that anytime I started a patient on a drug, that not only did I discuss those side effects, but I documented which side effects I discussed and that the patient was in agreement to try the treatment and what the protocol would be if they developed those side effects. Okay. And that was all had to be in the patient note. Now, somehow we've devolved into this trap show, is
Devolved
yeah,
is right.
completely devolved into this. Oh well, we're just going to give the drug, and I think a lot of that has happened because of the time pressure in the system. And the truth of the matter is, all we were required to do as physicians, as nurse practitioners, is to do what's called the standard of care, right? The standard of care has gone to crap, right? So it's kind of like common core curriculum in school, right? Like it sounds great that we're gonna make sure we hit all these points, but we can just launch to the moon from there, except that never happens, right? Like, and the
Right.
system, the systematic structure that you create really kind of ensures that doesn't happen, right? You're just going to do the
Yes.
basic and you're going to go on because at the end of the day, you got to make so many widgets. And that's what has happened to healthcare. And I just couldn't go along with that. So yeah, sadly, almost all of these things. I mean, there's been nothing I've been shocked about. Nothing I've been shocked about. All those things
Well,
have been at the beginning.
and I want to mention too, the side effects of it is you're not just losing weight, but you're losing muscle.
Yes. Yeah. And that's honestly just it's just part of the process. So it is a side effect, but it's just a known side effect, right? That and this is every person, right? This
Mhm.
is every single person taking GLP-1, the ones that are doing great with it, right? I feel great. Well, there's two things that are happening. One, that's one, and we're going to get into that. The other thing that happens too is it actually affects your brain and it affects even your personality centers. They've done some studies on that, showing that it's even affecting, the fluidity of your personality because it's actually going to your brain. That's scary, right?
That's
But
scary.
in terms of your body mass, so as you lose weight, and so this was the problem too with the traditional, like any kind of calorie restricted weight loss, right? So I've been studying weight loss, my entire career is part of a big part of my practice. And, the traditional weight loss, which is, do an 800 calorie diet, do a 1200 calorie diet, when you're just restricting calories, right? Which is really all you're doing in a GLP-1 program, right? Because you just eat less because your stomach doesn't want to receive more food. Because your brain is in your stomach is feeling satiated from very small amounts. So what you're doing is you're just calorie restricting. So when you calorie restrict, you lose pretty much equal parts muscle and fat, right? So that's great in the fat part, but it's bad in the muscle part. And then they find out the more cycles of that you do, the less muscle you have to even lose, so you're just losing more and more muscle till almost at the end of these yo-yo cycles that people go through with weight loss, which is what happens if you don't stay on the medication forever, which is why they hook you into the microdosing, is that you know you're going to regain weight as soon as you go back on it, right? And they've tried to like manipulate the data in some of the studies and show, oh no, they show that people still, and I was like, that's funny because I'm not seeing any of that, right? I see
Mhm.
very few people. The only people that I see that have successfully done that are people that had, a personal trainer and, were doing like an intensive nutritional program and like counting every nutrient, taking a bunch of vitamins. I mean, really doing like a full program with it. They've been okay and then transition off, but most people don't do it that way, right? And I do think it has a role for people who it could have a role for people who are morbidly obese, it done in that correct way.
Mhm.
But the way we're seeing it for people who have, I mean, even I'd say 40, 50 or less pounds to lose, it's really probably not worth the side effects. You got to start working on the root cause stuff, and go from there because every time that you go through a rapid weight loss and you lose more body muscle, what's happening is you're reducing your basal metabolic rate. So that means how many calories you can burn just sitting here, right? So because I've got a good amount of body muscle just sitting here on a day that I don't do too much, which is not a lot of days because I like doing stuff, but I can burn a decent amount of calories just from my muscle metabolism, right? Fat metabolism, very sluggish, doesn't really do much, right? So as you shrink your body muscle, and the sad thing is that you can't really tell that, a lot of times you just really can't tell. You think, oh no, I've still got muscle, but if you do like a body fat percentage to muscle percentage, you'll be shocked to see, I call those the skinny fat people. So it's like you're looking skinnier in your trimmer, but your percentage of body fat honestly still has you in like a higher risk category for a lot of different diseases, right? And then you're weaker. And then as you get older, you naturally lose more muscle. So then you get people who can become really debilitated, right? And it's very problematic because you're really doing it out of synchronicity with your body rather than what diet and exercise do, which is slowly build more muscle, slowly decrease fat. But people don't like to see that because they're focused on the scale, right? Stop looking at the scale. It's got some importance to it, but it's the least important thing. I probably haven't checked my weight in 2 years. So
Well,
it could be negative. It could be
and
negative.
so let me bring up a point here because I don't know if you've read the book. I think it's called the Sugar Trap.
Okay.
So it talks about how we are in our society, our brain is so lit up so often by foods, that food no that not the
Who
food
knows?
noise, but the real food is lighting up our brain, and our brain wants to be lit up. And so that is driving our behavior. So people are going basically from that in their brain. They're taking the GLP-1 drugs. And so that is toning all that down. That's quieting all of that. But I'm just thinking as you go off of those, and I don't know if people just plan to be on that their entire life, but at some point you will need to go off of those because you need to upregulate your metabolic health. You need to gain more muscle, and like your health will just deteriorate. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? Is that
Yeah, I
correct?
mean, I think this whole, it's and it goes back to the fact that like you could say, okay, well, your body needs a little bit of this peptide all the time. So what's the problem with microdosing? Well, I'm going to tell you that the problem with microdosing is just what I said in the beginning when I started talking about, what is GLP-1? It's a peptide. And in fact, there are many, 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 many peptides in your body, long list, right? And you can't just go microdosing all of those. So this is kind of gets us into what is the root cause, right?
Yes.
So about a year ago, I was like, I really need to do a little bit more research into where does all this come from, right? Because you and I were talking a little bit earlier before we started the podcast about everything that's trending starts with something truthful, right? And then it gets
Yes.
manipulated into something that makes money, right? So I did a deep dive about it and I was like, well, what is the deal with GLP-1s? Because yeah, it is a thing, right? So what is the thing that's the problem? And of course, it ties back to gut health, right? The GLP-1 is a peptide that's, guess where it's supposed to be created? In your gut. Guess what's supposed to create it? Your good gut bacteria. Okay.
Which
This
we're
is
low on.
information. Yeah, this is information that's been deeply suppressed by big pharma, right? They don't want people to know that. To me, that's mind-blowing information, right? Because if you know, okay, the root cause is really in my gut, and studies show that I got to keep taking really strong probiotics and I got to keep eating whole foods and I got to keep amping up on my fiber and I've got to do all these things to support my digestive health. But not only is that worth it for inflammation, but it's also worth it for my metabolic regulation and my brain health, right? And that in the end is what's going to stop the food noise because we actually know, right, that bad yeast and bacteria in your gut create cravings for you, right? And then those go to your brain and you think that's you, but it's a yeast beast, right? It's not actually you, right?
The
It's
yeast
crazy.
feast.
It's a
I
yeast
like that.
beast, you
I
know?
like that.
And so like when I do a lot of candida detoxes for people and I have to take them through a little journey of faith. I'm like, trust me, this is going to be bad at first, right? It ain't pretty to detox from the sugar, right? And all that stuff. They talk about it, the keto flu, right?
Mm.
And then they talk about, the detoxing, the release of the toxins as the yeast die off. And yeah, there's some truth to all that. And for some people, it's not too bad. And for other people, it is. But it is in fact true that, I mean, and people, I mean, cannot believe, I've had people come back to me and they are floored. I mean, just floored at the change in their mental health when they do that. Like, I mean, they're just like, I thought that I was just an anxious person my whole life, and I thought that, I had to take, antidepressants my whole life. And it's not this way for everybody, but I've had a good amount of people who've come back to me and they're like, this just blown my mind.
It
And
was
the
the
other
food.
thing
It
is,
was the food noise.
it was the food
it,
noise, right?
it was the food noise that was driving them crazy. Yeah,
Yes, right,
that
right. Who knows, right?
that
Yeah.
makes sense.
And all the toxins and all, I mean, it's a complex. So it's like, one of my hallmark sayings is, one good thing begets another good thing, right? So part of our problem is that we have been mentally conditioned, and this is a big pharma mental conditioning by both patients and physicians, to look for one problem and one solution and to study and to test that, right? And the truth of the matter is that's a fallacy of thinking in and of itself because there's nothing just one that happens anytime you do anything, right? Like, oh, I stubbed my toe. Well, then when I stubbed my toe, then I couldn't run, then I couldn't go do this, right? I mean, it's not just one thing, right? Like it's you can see it all over, right? There's
Never one
domino
thing.
effects, cascades, and you can't even imagine what happens inside your body. I mean, it is infinitely complex. I used to have a poster in one of my offices in the past that had like every single metabolic reaction known to man, and the font was like this big, and the poster was this big, and the one circle goes into the other circle, into the other circle, and it's so intricately related. So to do something really good, like really work on your foundational gut health. And the problem is it's not, people come to me too about, wanting natural weight loss. And it's a big part of what I do. And I have to explain to them that, it's going to take, probably about 4 weeks just to detox your body and just to start, killing off the bad and bringing in the good and to get the system rebooted
Mhm.
before you can even think about really losing weight. Now, some people get, lucky, probably 25% of people will lose weight in that process, pretty a good amount. another 25%, maybe a pound or two. Obviously, they're not thrilled about it because they made radical life changes and they've only lost 1 or 2 pounds, but then it sets the stage for all these other good things to happen, right? Like you've got to rebuild a foundation. So I like to bring people back to like the building a house analogy, right? Like when you are inflamed and your gut is bad, which is true for a great percentage of America today, not of your own fault, but because the fact antibiotics are everywhere. Even if you've not taken them, they're in your water, like they're sprayed on your food and your chicken, I mean, like it's crazy, right? The amount of toxins and stuff that we're exposed to. So, like, our guts are just not good. Most of us weren't breastfed by a mom who never, took any antibiotics or toxins for a year or more. I mean, like these things don't happen, right? So we're all at a disadvantage there, and that passes down through the generations, and we have the worst, good flora that we've ever had before. And so it's going to take work to get it better, right? So I explain to people, it's like as if you have this beautiful antique house and you love it, you want to make it, you have this vision to make it beautiful again, and like, but you can't just walk in and paint the wall, right? Like there's some serious foundational issues, right? The floor sinking in a little bit over here, this support poles tilting over here. You got to do some serious remodeling here, right? And this is I assess, with people, how far in this antique house process are you? How much remodeling do we have to do from the root building back up? And I think that's the mindset that you have to have, and it is time and it is money and it is energy and it is effort. But doing it in a more structured program with somebody like myself, who is a physician nutritionist and has all of this experience in this, is going to be a lot less time, money, energy, and effort than if you're just kind of dabbling all over the place, right? Like, I'll just try this program over here and then I'll buy this on Amazon. And then before you know it, you've wasted time and money and you're like, well, screw it. I'll just do a GLP-1.
Yes, you can waste a lot of money not finding the root cause and just guessing. I do feel like people are the experts of their body, but we aren't doctors. We can't just we're not just going to select the things that we need just out of intuition to fix. We want to band-aid ourselves is what's happening. We want to take that mentality of a quick fix and apply it to supplements, and that doesn't work. That's not, supplements are just that. They supplement your nutrition, your good diet, your exercise. So before
And
we
that's why
go,
what you're doing is so important, Robin. What you're doing is so important,
thank you.
because creating that balance for people, because there's way too much of that, oh, I'll just, do these 1, 2, 3 steps, and it's going to fix everything. So I don't really need doctors at all. I mean, that's not true either, right?
No.
And so your space and what this void that you're filling, is really important. So thanks for doing that.
Thank you. That's sweet of you to say that. Let's talk about, before we go, and we're actually going to have Dr. Bunsic on for another episode, but before we end this one, I do want to get into a little bit of the spiritual side of this, because if you have not been to Dr. Jana, her gift is that she not only evaluates your physical health, but she also tunes into your spirit and addresses some spiritual things that are going on that are foundational as well. If your house is kind of fallen down or needing a remodel, there's probably some spiritual roots, not just physical roots to that. So can we just address that for a minute, about how your spirit, your soul, and your body are all tied together? I know that's a huge, we could have a whole, we could do just a podcast on that every week. But
Let's do that.
but so I know that's a hard task to kind of summarize that, but as far as thinking about the GLP-1s and people thinking, okay, I'm overweight, but I'm perfect like I am. I'm it's not affect my weight's not affecting my health. Those things are not, that's not true. If you're carrying extra weight, it's affecting your health, friend. And nobody's judging you here. This is a no judgment zone. Nobody's judging you for that because a lot of it is you're stuck in that sugar trap. Your gut health is, you've got yeast growing in your gut, you don't have enough bacteria. Then we've got our mindset of the quick fix. But there's a deeper spirit, soul, body connection that um, Dr. Bunsic taps into that's real important. So say some talk a little bit about what you see that is a spiritual shift that needs to take place for people, instead of going for the quick fix.
The world has done a good job of disassociating us from our own selves.
Mm-hmm.
We are spirit, soul, and body. And like you said, there's a whole podcast series we could probably do on that. But I think we got to start with recognizing that. And a big thing that I have seen in terms of healing for myself and for others is the concept of repentance. In Hebrew, that's teshuvah. And what it means is two things. There's more, but two main things. One is remembrance, right? Remembering who you are, right? You're a child of God, and you are a eternal spiritual being having a human experience, right? So the ways of the spirit are higher. So when we want to do these hacky, manipulative things with our body, and we're not honoring our spirits and souls, the eternal part of ourself first, and letting that flow through into our decisions with our body, which is so much of what we see happening, right? And that has been really reinforced by the whole big pharma and really the whole medical structure, which is another reason why I had to leave the structure, the traditional structure. And so it's really important that we first and foremost just recognize that's an issue, because until you don't recognize that's an issue, you can't heal there, right? Like you can't just pretend it's all okay, right? And that's what kind of gets you into this magic wand pitfall, right? Like, well, the GLP-1s will be like the magic wand that I wave, and it gets rid of the food noise and the bad things, and then I'll feel better about myself, and then I'll do, and those things aren't untrue, but it's like it's making the tail the head and not the head to the tail. You know what I mean? So it's not untrue, but it's out of godly order, right? So the godly order, and that's just really something that, as I flow with the Holy Spirit in my practice, it's like, what do you want to bring forward for this person today? What is really the thing, And it's funny because as I'm praying through each appointment, and I'm like, I just listen to the Holy Spirit, and I'm like, I'm just sensing something about, something that happened with your dad, like, and, then they'll be like, well, you know what, this just happened and blah, 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 blah. Right. So then we go to the root of, well, is good or bad as your dad is, he's actually not your father, right? He is in stewardship of you, and was in stewardship of you, still is. You're in that lineage. That can be a great blessing, but ultimately you are a child of God, and the love of God, and you feeling the love of God, and that coming from your spirit in oneness with the Holy Spirit flowing through your soul gates and your body gates has to be part of this healing process, right? And oftentimes, we use food as an idol, right? So food, and so when you're getting to that food noise, and I was just praying about, my family member that I was talking about the other day that was talking about the food noise. And I was just, God just said, well, it's just because, when times were tough, the food was there for that person. And that person just learned to always turn to the food. And how is that any different than, the Asheroth poles in the Old Testament, right? When we get in trouble, if God's not really there, we'll turn to those poles and pray, right? That is an idol. right? So many people are still using food as an idol in their life. And until you address that, with the Lord, and you come forward with repentance and you follow his process that he's leading to you in healing, and praying through that with the Shema prayer. Shema means to hear, right? Hear, O Israel, right? The Lord your God, the Lord is one, right? That also means you're one with him, right? But the first thing is hear, right? And what we like to do is say, God, is it okay if I take GLP-1s? Will you make sure I don't die so I can lose weight? Thank you, amen, right? And that's the prayer that most people are saying. And then they're like, well, God, I prayed about it and I'm okay to take the GLP-1s. And I'm not saying that the Lord won't have grace for that. But that's not really the highest way, right? The highest way is let's really look at your whole body and healing, because the eternal part of yourself needs to heal even more than this limited physical part of yourself does. But they're connected, and the limited physical part of yourself is actually like a signaling board for all the things that are going on that are deeper. So let's just learn to listen to our body, right? What is your body saying to us? Like, and that's a whole journey in and of itself. And it's actually kind of cool. So you got to step away from like I want my body to do this now, right? Into, well, what is my body saying to me today, right?
Well, a lot of that is fear driven, though. So when people do hear their body saying something, like if my knee is hurting, then it's like, oh no, am I going to need a knee replacement? It's fear driven. And what I've seen the Lord do is when your knee's hurting, I've learned to think of that like the Lord saying, hey, let's heal that knee. Like there's been something wrong with it, but now I'm letting you hear it. And so let's heal it. So I think that's the Lord's way of saying, hey, you're ready to heal this. And that may have some spiritual significance to your knee. So, well, I love all that you've said about that. Jana and I are going to continue this conversation next time because she has she's got a machine in her office called the M-Sculpt Neo that if you are feeling like you've crawled into this hole, this sugar trap, this food noise, and it feels like a huge struggle to get out of, and you don't want to do the GLP-1s. You want to honor your body. You want to honor yourself as God's child and creation, but you are struggling with that. She has a machine that can help us with that. And we're going to talk about that next time, the M-Sculpt Neo. And so sometimes it is great to have a tipping point, like something that's just going to tip you a little bit, nudge you over into the right direction. And so I feel like this can be more than a nudge, but sometimes we need a little something to help us shift and feel like, hey, we can do this. I can change my diet. I can start to exercise. And so sometimes we need a little push. And I feel like that's what this M-Sculpt Neo can do for people. So I want to talk about that next time. But any final thoughts about GLP-1 drugs? If you just were going to say, hey, final recommendation, what would
Yeah.
it be?
Yeah, I would say if you're looking at it for weight loss, if your hemoglobin A1C is less than 5.8, that's not the right thing for you. And I would even argue even into like the low sixes to mid sixes. Multiple studies have shown that diet and exercise are far superior. And we can talk a little bit more too about
Mhm.
diet next time, because
Yes.
along with the M-Sculpt Neo program, I really dive deep into diet, and I have a basic structured diet called the Rainbow Keto Diet. But then I also customize for people, and we can, dive deep into like food allergy sensitivities and some other things too, with particular patients if they need it. But usually it's about detox, gut health, and then the diet program that supports all that. and then doing that in conjunction with the M-Sculpt Neo program to
Mhm.
both burn fat and build muscle. Because remember, we've got to improve that basal metabolic rate, right? Which is the opposite of what the GLP-1s do. So if you're going to invest, time, money, energy, and effort into a program, do one that's going to keep building you up, right? That's going to be building at that actual foundation, not just some little twigs, right? Like not the what is it, the three little pigs, right? The one with the house made of straw, and you want
Yes.
to build the right house, right? So
Don't remodel with sticks.
don't remodel with sticks and sand, and yeah, it's not what we're doing, right? So
No.
we want to have that good, solid, concrete foundation. So that's what we're doing by building muscle, right? So it's about building muscle, burning fat, and then also that also helps with some accelerated detox too. And it's really about timing. You've got to be ready to do the thing, right? And I think that's a big trap that people fall into, the GLP-1s, because they're ready for a change, but they're not ready to really make the changes, right? It's like the change happens first here, right? And so that's a critical thing to acknowledge, right? And the cool thing is, if you are a spiritual person, when you pray for the equipping for that change, God will give you all that you need, right? He will give you the time, money, energy, and effort, right? And it's been an amazing process to see that happen for people, and then to see them then be able to take that to the next step of wellness, and to have people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s that are healthier now because of really this intensive rebuilding, remodeling program than they were 10 or 20 years ago, is freaking awesome. Like, I love that. It
Yeah.
excites me to come to work to see that, and to see that happen, and to be able to make that happen for people. So yeah, I'm excited to talk more about that in our next time together.
I
Thank you,
know.
Rob.
I can't wait. I can't wait. Thank you for being here today and for sharing with us. I feel like it's so good to have a doctor that we can trust who is going to tell us the truth about and not just sell us medication. So thank you so much for being willing to step out of um, that whole doctor trap that they get you caught in. So thank you for doing that for us. So friends, thank you for listening, and we will see you next week to talk about nutrition, diet, exercise, detoxing, and the M-Sculpt Neo, which is going to help you burn fat and gain muscle. So we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining me today on GPS Your Health. If this episode encouraged you, brought you clarity, or helped you just feel a little less alone on your journey, I invite you to share it with someone who may need the same hope. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share it with others. It helps this message reach more people who are searching for answers. You can also connect with me beyond the podcast by visiting my website and joining me on Facebook and Instagram for more encouragement, resources, and guidance on your healing journey. Remember, you don't have to navigate your health alone. God sees you, He cares about every detail, and He is guiding you toward healing, one step at a time. If you are ready for support in finding the right doctor or exploring the next step in your healing journey, be sure to connect with me and check out the resources in the show notes. Until next time, stay the course.